Good morning, everybody, and thank you so much for joining our first executive morning brief on sustainable leadership and transformation. My name is Tobias. I'm a community director with CBS Executive, and today I'm joined by Andreas, Rasche, professor at CBS, and Susanne, partner at PwC. Now, I'll give Andreas and Susanne a proper introduction in a minute, once I've gone through the introductory remarks, as well as a few practicalities based mainly around our technical setup this morning. Now, sustainable leadership and transformation is very much a headline for us in CBS Executive for 2024. And that's because it is, and we believe increasingly will be, a key task for leaders across the business world to transition businesses to a sustainable future. That's one point. The second is that we sincerely believe that the Nordic countries have the means to be frontrunners in this transition. For that same reason, this is the first episode of many coming up of Executive Morning Briefs. Through the course of the coming months, we are going to host a number of these sessions. So this is basically the first episode. We are conducting these sessions mainly to start building community, to drive the sustainable leadership and transformation agenda. Now, obviously, sustainability, ESG, everything within this sphere is a massive topic. And we're not telling ourselves that we are going to be able to cover everything today within 45 minutes. That would be nonsense. But we have decided to focus this first session on the trends within sustainability in 2024. In terms of today's agenda, once I finish the introductory remarks, I'll hand it over to Andreas and Susanne, who will do an initial discussion on their viewpoint of the trends of 2024, and then we'll open for questions through Slido. Now, we've been rather overwhelmed with the interest we've seen for this event, so we've chosen to host it through the webinar version of Zoom, which means that you are per default muted. We are going to have interaction through Slido throughout the session. And please feel free to leave comments in the chat function in Zoom as well. We do have eyes on that. Finally, and as a final practicality, I have to inform you that we are recording this session and that we will send you an email directly following the meeting with a link to the session in its full length. Cool. Now, as mentioned, today we have Susanne and Andreas with us. Susanne is partner and head of PwC Denmark's ESG and sustainability offering. Susanne is an internationally renowned expert on sustainability and ESG with an expertise that spans more or less all areas of ESG and sustainability, including climate action, sustainable business development, ESG reporting, etc. Andreas is a professor of business in society at Copenhagen Business School's Center for Sustainability. His research examines the intersection of corporate sustainability, sustainable finance, and the political role of the firm. And aside from his research, Andreas is a renowned teacher and instructor and has won several rewards for his executive teaching, amongst other places, here with us at CBS Executive. Now, again, we have focused the session on sustainability trends for 2024. We try to summarize those or give examples of what those trends could be in three main questions that we also put on the website through which you signed up. The first one focuses on the continued adoption of the new EU regulation on ESG reporting and due diligence, that it is our impression a lot of organizations still that still poses challenges for quite a number of organizations. The second potential key trend for 2024 is very much the continued innovation, mainly through new AI solutions within the digital and technical sphere. And finally, the potential key trend for 2024 as well, whether organizations feel that they have the right knowledge, skills, and mindset to execute the transition towards sustainable business models. Now, this was our initial attempt to summarize what could be key trends for 2024. We would very much like to hear your input as well. Hence, in a second, we are going to show you the first Slido input we have for this session, the word cloud. We're going to ask you to either take your phone and simply scan the QR code through the screen, or log on to slido.com and use the code that will be available on the coming slide. It's important to note that we do the word cloud now. Then I'm going to hand it, as that slowly emerges, I'm going to hand it over to Susanne and Andreas. Once I've done so, we're going to keep sharing the word cloud for the first couple of minutes until all of you have been able to leave your comments. Then we're going to stop sharing our screen, but it will still be possible for you to ask questions again through Slido while Susanne and Andreas talks. Once they have had their initial discussion, we are going to reshare our screen and then take the questions that you have posed throughout the initial discussion and follow up on those. Cool. Next slide, please. What is the biggest sustainability challenge in your organization in 2024? Again, please log on to Slido, either by scanning the QR code or providing the code below 2236705 on slido.com. And Susanne and Andreas, I know you haven't said anything yet, but I'm sure you're going to warm up your voices really quickly once these key topics start emerging on the
of course. I mean, exactly. So thanks, Tobias, also for this great introduction, and I think it's really great to see this, also to see what you all think about sustainability challenges. And we will, our idea, Susanne and my idea was, that we build this into our discussion as we see kind of what is on your mind. And of course, as a researcher, I always look for patterns, right? I mean, this is what I'm looking for. So it is really interesting to see this cloud build up here. And maybe I want to already shift it over to the discussion, and start with, I mean, we showed three key questions here, and the first question obviously was around the EU regulations, and there is no doubt, and we already also see it here. There are terms like due diligence, compliance, reporting on the on this word cloud here. We already see this is still on all of our minds. 2023 was the year where most of these regulations were either finished or really became part of the public discourse. Shortly before Christmas, we got final notice on what the due diligence regulation will look like in detail. So I would say the discussion of the regulation itself is in a sense over. We now need to discuss implementation. We now need to discuss, how to embed this within structures, within mindsets. And I think this is where I think we will see a shift in the discourse in 2024. I think in 2023, we discussed a lot what is in and what is out in these regulations, right? So there were rich discussions around, for instance, director's duty. Is it a good thing? Is it not a good thing in the due diligence regulation? We discussed the ESRS when they came out in July. Was a kind of a public outcry because of the move towards materiality assessments and away from mandatory indicators. So I want to pick your brain, Susanne. Where do you think we stand with regard to these regulations in 2024? Do you see it also as a big trend? The audience seems to really see it. I mean, compliance, I understand this as particularly targeted around the new EU regulations. What is your take on it?
Yeah, thank you very much. Also, thank you for having me. I think it's interesting to see this word cloud because, like you say, due diligence, reporting, compliance really stands out as high priorities, and so does AI. And I'm sure that we will come back to that because what I noted was that that was actually the first one, so the top of mind for at least the fast responders. So you're right, Andreas. I think 2024 is really, year zero. It heralds a new era in how companies work with sustainability, simply because sustainability reporting is becoming now mandatory. And as many of you will know, the regulation is being rolled out in waves. So the first wave affects the large listed companies who must report according to the new directive and the new standards as of this financial year 2024. Then next year we have the next wave, which would be large companies in Denmark, and then the year after we have smaller and medium-sized listed companies. So this really is a transformation that is going to be huge. But I think it's important that we also discuss, what reporting can do, because this directive is about transparency in reporting. It's about providing insights to report users about what you do. It doesn't really require specifically what you do or how ambitious you would be. And I think what we will likely come back to is the balance between reporting and action in this space. So I think let's leave that as a cliffhanger.
Yes.
And I'll just quickly say, not to interrupt your discussion, but we will stop sharing the screen now so that all participants will be able to see you as you discuss. And to all participants, again, you will be able to ask questions through Slido as Susanne and Andreas speaks. And we'll reshare the Slido and see what questions you have posed throughout the discussion. Take it away.
Thanks, Tobias. Yes, and I want to come back, Susanne, to my initial point regarding beyond compliance, right? Because I think there is a real risk. I mean, one of the key trends on the word cloud was compliance, which is true. I mean, we all need to be compliant, but the real value in these regulations probably lies beyond compliance. We don't have any academic insights into this yet, I must say, but usually also with regard to other regulations that were studied, the findings are, if corporations reap value out of regulations, then it is by going beyond compliance, by using them as frameworks for reflection, by deeply embedding them into the company. Susanne, do you think that this is happening in Danish corporations or the corporations that you have worked with? How far are these regulations really implemented? I mean, we're talking about ESRS over 1,000 data points, if I'm not mistaken. So this is a lot of work. How do we get people away from just ticking the boxes and really understanding the rationale behind these regulations?
Yeah, well, maybe just for context and also to build up my credibility in speaking about this topic. So I have been involved in the making of these new standards and in the dialogue with the Commission around the new directive that is now being implemented. And the reason for introducing it is a recognition that sustainability reporting, as we have come to know it, may be a good read. It may be interesting, but it really doesn't move the needle. So for all those of you who are joining this webinar, who are involved in or responsible for sustainability reporting, this is kind of depressing insights. So how do we turn that around? And the way we turn it around is to take a perspective where we say reporting or disclosures of companies' performance, of their actions, of their strategy is intended to provide information that is useful for a report user, to facilitate their, I would say, their valuation of the company. So report users might be investors or analysts. It might be future employees. It might be partners wanting to collaborate. And of course, indeed, also current employees who may use the report to hold it as a mirror against, the reality that they see. So, the intent of sustainability reporting is really to provide a way of expressing how does this company create value and value over time. And in the same way, where would we see that we are risking or actually losing value? So where would there be value leaks in our operations? And if you find that insight, which is what is now part of the directive, part of the standards, is that you need to do, as a very first step, your so-called double materiality assessment, which means to identify what is material for your business from a business enterprise value perspective, as well as from the perspective of your company's impact on society. And when you make that analysis, and that's just my conclusion to your question, Andreas, you actually gain some insights about your business that you didn't have before doing this. And that's what we're seeing already, is those aha moments, which to me are encouraging that we will get beyond mere compliance.
I just want to follow up on this an entire reporting discussion with something that happened towards the end of the year, where almost seemingly a battle broke out between ISSB with a single materiality approach and then the CSRD with a double materiality approach. Emmanuel Faber wrote an op-ed in Le Mans, which was very, very public in a sense. And where do you see, globally speaking, us moving? Will we have two reporting regimes, ISSB on the one hand, and then in Europe and maybe also a little bit beyond Europe, the CSRD regime? Or maybe, and this is also something I'm thinking about a lot these days, it is also not necessarily a battle. I don't like this kind of framing as a battle, because in a sense, financial materiality and impact materiality are two sides of the same coin, so to say, right? What are your thoughts on this?
Yes, so I actually sensed it very concretely, because I was part of developing the framework for the new ISSB standards at the same time as I was involved in the European standards. So it was slightly schizophrenic at the time. And you're right, the ISSB is not going to take that word double materiality into their mouth. And the reason being that there's a sense that certain constituencies, particularly in North America, just don't grasp that understanding of double materiality. So they've chosen to stick with it. Will there be two regimes? Yes, there will. And the intent, or the sort of the solution to this, is that the ISSB will be the global baseline that will be embedded via adoption by stock exchanges or adoption by legislation globally. And then the European standards, you can consider those as adding something on top of the ISSB. So it has been established that companies operating Europe who are going to be reporting according to the European standards will be covered. So they shouldn't also do ISSB. But where that is not the case, then ISSB will be expanded as a rule.
Yeah. So 2024, I think we all agree on this will be the year, where we see lots of more regulation. Before we move to the questions, let me kind of push our debate, Susanne, a little bit into the AI direction, because that was a topic that also appeared on the work cloud pretty prominently. And when I have talked and look at social media these days, there's a lot of talk about AI and sustainability. You can use it to measure things more precisely. You can monitor, for instance, in agriculture, you can monitor things better. Where do you see AI and particularly this reporting agenda overlapping? I mean, what might we see in 2024 in terms of real life actions that are based on AI in the sustainability reporting field?
Yeah, so what we already will see is that embedded in the new European standards is a requirement for so-called digital tagging, which means that now that we have standards, we also have a standardized framework or way of using terms, so that you can provide tagging, and that enables reading, machine reading of your reporting. So that's a way of facilitating the use of information, so that, in other words, it's easier to find the information. But of course, at the same time, there's also an increased risk of misinformation and disinformation, which is contrary to the intent of the Transparency Reporting Directive. And those of you who've seen the World Economic Forum Global Risk Report that came out just last week, it's interesting to see that over a 10-year horizon, misinformation and disinformation would be a number 5 risk on the grid. But currently, in the short term, in the 2-year horizon, it's actually the number 1 risk. So there's a huge attention to what AI can do in terms of misinformation. What we're yet to see, and that's what you touch upon with agricultural information, etc., is how we can actually use geospatial information, how we can combine the various sources of data to provide a better and more complete picture. And we haven't really seen that yet unfolding.
Yeah.
I think you've all tried to, make a profile of yourself and have your CV. And at least when I did, I thought that was really interesting, because the ChatGPT placed me in many positions I've never been at.
And I can just tell you, here at CBS, we of course also have our experiences with ChatGPT and student papers. Of course, I also see this entire AI debate quite interestingly embedded into the investment debate, right? Because a lot of investors work with it in terms of having quant portfolios, for instance, ESG portfolios being designed in quant ways, and also getting information more granular and fine-grained information on the targets they invest in. So I think this is another layer more towards the ESG, the investment debate, where you see really AI picking up. It has been around for a couple of years, but I think with the new more kind of generative AI improving so much over such a short period of time, we will see really, I think, also new applications in the investment world. Tobias, do we want to move?
Yes, I was just about to say thank you so much for this initial discussion. We already have quite a number of questions. I think Thomas Lyse from Ørsted, if I'm not mistaken, was the first with a hand. I have an allow to talk functionality. That's a dangerous one to have. I'm going to press it now for you, Thomas, and we'll have your question.
Thomas? Otherwise, can you read it out?
Or just put it in the chat, Thomas, that will work as well. All right, while we wait for, okay, all good, Thomas, no problem. I'll mute you again. First of all, the first question that came in the chat is from Glenn Frommer, and that's basically a more generic question focused on what are we transforming to?
Yeah,
We're
that's
talking
a
of
good
a
question, actually.
transition.
Yeah.
What does that go from and towards? What would be your perspective on that?
Susanne, you wanna start?
Yeah, I'd be happy to, and I think that also speaks to you know, the intricacies of our headline, because when we talk about sustainable leadership and sustainable business, sustainable finance, it always brings out an alert to me, because what does that then mean? Does it mean less unsustainable, or do we actually have a definition of what sustainability would look like? And Glenn, good to have you here. I'm sure that you know better than most about, you know, the planetary boundaries, the needs for staying within what the Earth can cope with, and what we need as a human species. And I think that's what we are looking towards. And I think on that note, what I find interesting is that we have insights from a PwC survey that actually came out last year, where we asked CEOs globally, and we asked them, do you think your organization will be economically viable in 10 years' time if you continue on your current course? And 40% of them said no. But then at the same time, we then asked them, so are you spending enough time on business reinvention? And they also said no. So I think we're sitting on insights here that we know that we are on a track that is not taking us where we need to go. But at the same time, we are not really taking those actions that need to happen. And then coming back to the reporting regime, which does have some indications of what you need to do, namely to transition to a low carbon economy, to work towards a just economy. So there are some pointers of what needs to be done, but the clarity around what good looks like is still missing.
Yeah, I very much agree with what you say. I think you can answer that question in an internal and an external way, right? Externally, you can say we are transitioning hopefully towards a more sustainable environment. Although, to be quite honest, and Glenn, I think you would probably also share that view. I don't think, you know, that we are anywhere near there. I mean, all the data that we are getting, also in terms of in terms of the climate data we got last year, right, kind of indicates that this transitioning is right now not really functioning. We've crossed 6 out of the 9 planetary boundaries. It is not that we are making really significant progress in any area. The only area, by the way, there was an assessment, a scientific assessment last year, where we have the momentum towards a real transition are electric vehicles. This is the only area really where we have this momentum. Now the new IEE report came out with kind of telling us, you know, renewables are massively on the rise, and this certainly is a good thing. But I think if you look at the entire external transition that is needed, which also needs to be a just transition, Al Gore always highlights that, right? This just transition, we shouldn't leave people behind there. It is a monumental task, and we would need much more deeper and swift directions. Internally, I hope, you know, we transition towards organizational structures, but particularly also organizational cultures that really take this topic seriously. I know many companies do, but I also know many companies that probably more or less play the compliance game, that kind of do it in the box ticking exercise. And I think if we want to see a transition externally, we need to move internally towards much better management, much more attention, and also maybe a little bit higher levels of ambition.
Thank you so much for those reflections. We're going to reshare a Slido now, as there are a number of questions here. Again, feel free to interact here, both like, if you will, the questions you want us to discuss and or fill in your own questions.
Can I?
Yeah, shoot, Andreas.
No, because I saw in the Q&A, I actually saw an interesting question around small and medium-sized companies, because it was someone anonymous. The current focus on EU regulations is focused on ensuring large companies. How do you see the regulation evolving to include small and medium-sized enterprises? Do you expect to see smaller companies getting any kind of advantage on reporting standards in the future? And I want to ask Susanne on this, because you are very close to the companies. And of course, I think the person who asked this question is right. I mean, most of the time, we focus on, of course, the very large companies, but also then kind of, I would say, the step below this. What about the SMEs? The EU kind of issued more or less a voluntary draft standard for the ESRS for SMEs. But where do you think the journey is going towards, Susanne, when it comes to SMEs?
Yeah, and there is and has been from the outset plans to also have standards that cover SMEs. And of course, that has been heavily debated, because that's when you have the discussion around an unreasonable burden on these companies. So the intent was from the very beginning that it would have to be proportionate. So proportionate standards, proportionate requirements. These requirements have been postponed simply due to the fact that the attention needs to be now on implementation of the standards that apply to large listed companies. But in reality, many of the small and medium-sized companies will be encountering these requirements because they are suppliers or partners to some of the companies that must report. And when they must report on their value chain, then they will be asking questions of their business partners. So certainly we see in the space of carbon emissions, as well as due diligence on respect of human rights, business ethics, etc., that it is coming to them indirectly, and of course it's a fair question. Are they equipped? Do they have the resources? And many of them don't, because they don't have an organization in place to anchor this. So I think that speaks to what you said, Andreas, also about the internal organization that needs to be realigned.
Yeah, and following up on this, there is this question here on Slido. What do you see as the most important factors that can make up top management accomplish beyond compliance perspective? And I think this is a fantastic question, and it is one that I'm also spending a lot of time on reflecting through various projects that I'm having. And I would say, before I let Susanne also reflect on it, I think one important thing is you need to have a good internal governance structure for sustainability. If you don't have this governance structure, if sustainability is all over the place, then it is very difficult also for top management to see where these discussions are actually happening. So you need some sort of, particularly on the board level, you need a committee, or you need a very well organized board. If you don't have a committee, also on the C level or the level VP level, you need structures where these discussions can happen. You then need some sort of competencies. The people really need to understand what is the link between value generation, risk reduction, and sustainability. So that, I think, also in a sense is an education task to some degree. I think we have people with a lot of awareness, right? But awareness is not the same as understanding. So if you are aware of scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions, that doesn't necessarily mean you understand potential risks. And then last but not least, I think we need incentives, and real good incentives, not like we are doing it right now. There are all these studies that say, oh, top managers bonuses are coupled towards ESG. But then if you look very closely, actually the targets are set in a way that they almost always cash in on these bonuses, because the targets are simply not set at an ambitious enough level. So we need ambitious incentives. Susanne, what is your take on it?
Yeah, just to build on what you said, is the fact that reporting compliance is about the pain, right? It's painful to make sure that you meet it, but there needs to be a gain in it as well. There needs to be something that you want to achieve, and so that is about understanding how this may provide you lower cost of capital, better access to capital. We all know that where money flows, prosperity goes, and that's a key element here. And this is where I'm actually encouraged by the fact that with the directive and its requirements that the oversight and approval of sustainability reporting must be anchored with the board, and specifically for those companies that have an audit committee or an audit and risk committee, it needs to be anchored there. And who is in the organization, the touch point for the audit committee is typically the CFO. So this becomes CFO remit, and when it moves from the sustainability officer's remit to the CFO's remit, there is also an opportunity to have better internal anchoring, more power and influence, and also an understanding of where do we see the benefits coming out of this. So this move to CFO and CFO's organization, and the very strong anchoring with the board are absolutely critical.
Yeah, I fully agree with you. By the way, I like your compliance, pain, and gain. I will cite you on that. That's a good one. Let me move to this question here around the job market in Denmark, because I think it actually is a question that is on the minds also of many people. And Susanne, you have a lot of insights into the job market. I see myself, I'm heading up our MBA program, among other things, and I see also a lot of our students, they move into the sustainability direction. Where will the job market in 2024 for sustainability? Where will this move in Denmark?
Yeah. So if you are looking for a job and you have just the faintest touch of sustainability profile, so that you can go for an ESG manager role, that's where your success would lie. But then, of course, what is interesting is, so what does an ESG manager do, right? So an ESG manager in the current need is really somebody who can collect the data and bring about the information that needs to be provided. What we also need is, of course, somebody who can make sense of that data that is being collected and actually make it useful. So that would be my expectations of a competent ESG manager as well. And coming back to my point about the CFO, somebody who can really connect the dots and bring that insight to management, so that the organization is acting upon those insights. But you're right. You can be an ESG manager in just a few weeks, but it takes, of course, more of to build a stronger foundation over time. That's where we need the likes of you and the CBS programs.
And I think that's going to be our final remark regarding questions. I know there are more questions that we are leaving unanswered. As I said initially, we we're not telling ourselves that we can cover everything within this sphere in 45 minutes, but please know that we are taking all of your questions as input for the coming sessions that I'll briefly walk you through in a minute.
Tobias,
yeah.
Can I just have 20 seconds, please, for the very last question?
I was about to give you a minute, so 20 seconds.
Okay, oh, a minute. Okay.
Andreas. Yeah.
30 seconds for me, 30 for Susanne. We share it. Do startups need to look into this? My response to this would be yes, of course. Although you are not in scope for CSRD or the CSDDD, these regulations, they have a value chain perspective. So even as a small company, you are very likely, to receive disclosure requests from business partners that are in your larger value or supply chain. So I think when is the right time to look at it? I would say now. This is mostly because of the setup of these type of regulations. Susanne?
Yes, agree. The best time is yesterday. But it's also much more encouraging to actually see how you can build a company where sustainability is factored in from the very beginning. And we actually see many new startups that are built around a very clear purpose of wanting to contribute to a more sustainable society. And if I should leave the participants here with a piece of advice, is really to not start with your reporting, but start with your why. Why are you in business? And then let your reporting reflect how you then ensure that you will be successful in delivering on your purpose.
Well said.
I think we'll leave a dot after that one. I was about to give you 1 minute each to summarize the key 2024 trends, but I think that's more or less the conclusion of today. Thank you so much, Susanne and Andreas, and thanks to all of you for your questions. Again, I know that we have left some of them unanswered, but we are taking them as input for coming executive brief sessions. Can we have the final slide, please? Thank you. Now, I'll just briefly sum this up, and then we're going to say thanks for now. The next session we have on February 28th, again from 9 to 9:45. Andreas will invite Ingrid Reumert, who is SVP of Global Stakeholder Relations at Ørsted, to discuss, which was one of the topics in the questions as well here, sustainability and senior executive relations. How do you go about managing sustainability in the top sphere of organizations, both towards your C-suite, or if you are a C-suite, towards your boards? Further, we have a number of upcoming programs. Feel free to check them out on our website. And as a final remark, this is very much intended as a first step in building community within the sphere. So if you have any questions, comments, any reason to interact, please feel absolutely free to get in touch with us. You can reach out to either me or my colleague Henrik, who's mentioned at the bottom of this slide, and we'll take it from there. Again, we have recorded the session, and following later today, once the Zoom app has downloaded the recording, we'll send you an email with a link to sign up for the coming session on February 28th, as well as a link to the reporting. Thank you so much, Susanne. Thank you so much for Andreas for spending the morning with us, and thanks to all of you participants listening in. We very much appreciate that you joined us this morning.
Thank you very much from my side, particularly to Susanne. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. Always a pleasure.
Have a good day, everybody. Bye-bye.
Yeah. Bye-bye, everybody.